In the remote northern mountains of Isher, where mist clings to the rugged peaks and the cold seems to cut into your very bones, a team of elite operatives known as Spectre Unit embarked on what they thought would be a routine reconnaissance mission. These mountains, cloaked in fog and superstition, were known not only for hiding smugglers and other outlaws but also for tales of strange, inexplicable phenomena that had haunted the locals for centuries. Among the many ghost stories and strange happenings, there was one particular encounter that stood out, a tale that would follow Captain Alex Turner and his team long after they'd left that place. It was late 2014, and Spectre Unit, consisting of 8 seasoned operatives, was deployed to investigate a series of caverns in the remote Hadran Valley. Intelligence reports had indicated that these caves might be used by traffickers to store contraband, and the mission was straightforward: sweep the area, verify any suspicious activity, and mark locations for further investigation if necessary. But as soon as they arrived at the edge of the valley, an unnatural silence blanketed the area. No sounds of animals, no wind whispering through the cracks in the rock, just an oppressive, almost suffocating stillness. On the third night, as they approached one of the larger cave openings that they'd marked for inspection, Captain Turner felt an inexplicable chill creeping up his spine. He eyed the gaping black maw of the cave and couldn't shake a feeling of dread that was settling over him. Ramirez, one of the team's veterans, glanced at the entrance and muttered, "I feel like we're being watched." Turner could sense it too, but without further explanation, they proceeded with the mission. The temperature plummeted as they ventured inside. What had been a mild chill outside turned into an unnatural, penetrating cold. Lanterns in hand, they moved cautiously through the darkness, their footsteps echoing strangely off the walls. The cave's rough stone seemed to absorb light, making the dark even darker, as though the shadows themselves were pressing in on them. The floor was scattered with strange markings, scratches or perhaps symbols that seemed far older than any human presence. Then they heard it. At first it was just a faint whisper, so soft that it could have been the sound of their own footsteps. But soon, it became clear that this was no trick of the mind. It was a voice. Whispering, echoing off the walls. "Did you guys hear that?" Davis, one of the operatives, asked, his voice low and tense. They paused, straining to listen. The sound grew, morphing from a whisper into a low, mournful moan that seemed to fill every crevice of the cave. It was an eerie, almost unnatural sound, like something that was both human and inhuman at once. They glanced at each other, their faces pale in the dim glow of their lights. With his heart pounding, Turner gestured for them to keep moving. As they pressed on, the cave opened up into a massive chamber. There, in the center of this stone cathedral, stood a makeshift altar, crafted from bones and arranged with almost ritualistic precision. Symbols were etched into the surrounding stone, marks none of them recognized. The air was thick with the smell of decay and something else, something ancient and foul that they couldn't quite place. Ramirez raised his flashlight, casting a pale light over the bone altar. "This isn't something smugglers would leave behind," he murmured, his voice barely audible. Before they could process what they were seeing, the whispering escalated into a scream, a long, piercing wail that seemed to shake the very walls around them. It was as if the cave itself was crying out, a deep, guttural roar that seemed to come from every direction at once. The team instinctively backed away, their rifles raised, but there was nothing there, only shadows and the echo of that horrendous sound. They turned, desperate to escape, but something strange was happening. The path they had entered by seemed darker, narrower, almost distorted. It was as if the walls themselves were shifting, rearranging to trap them inside. Their flashlights, which had cut through the darkness easily moments ago, now seemed dim, barely able to penetrate the surrounding blackness. The air felt thick, oppressive, as though something unseen was weighing down on them, watching their every move, as they hurried through the narrowing passage. The sounds began again, footsteps, slow and dragging, echoing from somewhere behind them. Every time they looked back, there was nothing to see, only shadows closing in, but the footsteps persisted, drawing nearer. Panic took hold, and Turner barked out the command, "Run!" They broke into a sprint, adrenaline and fear driving them forward. The footsteps grew louder, keeping pace, as if something was pursuing them from the depths of the mountain. Finally, they reached the cave's entrance, bursting out into the cold night air. Silence fell around them once more, and they stood there, gasping, waiting for whatever was inside to follow. But nothing came. The cave loomed silently behind them. As if it had swallowed up all traces of what had just happened. Back at the base, their report was met with skepticism. The official story was that the sounds were the result of natural echoes and strange acoustics. The bones and markings. Ancient artifacts left behind by unknown tribes, brushed off as remnants of forgotten rituals. But for the men of Spectre Unit, there was no dismissing what they had seen and heard. Over the following months, the men began experiencing strange symptoms, nightmares in which they heard the same whispers, shadowy figures lurking at the edges of their vision, a constant feeling of being watched. Some claimed they felt an unseen presence in their rooms, watching them while they slept. Others even described hearing the distant sound of dragging footsteps on quiet nights. Captain Turner, though trained to face the horrors of warfare, could never shake the feeling that something had followed them out of that cave, that a piece of whatever ancient evil they had disturbed was still lurking, watching from the darkness. The experience had scarred them all in ways no battlefield ever had. For those who've served in war zones, the horrors are usually human-made. But in certain remote places, something far older, and far more malicious, lurks in the shadows, waiting. Turner and his team learned this the hard way, and as far as they were concerned, those caves in the Hadran Valley would forever be marked as forbidden ground, a place where secrets from another world lie hidden, and where not every story has a logical explanation.